The first time I heard my new neighbor's voice through the wall, I dropped my coffee. It wasn't because he was loud or rude or arguing with someone. It was because that laugh flow, warm, a little rough at the edges, belonged to a man who's been dead for 14 years. The mug slipped straight through my fingers, hit the hardwood, and shattered, sending a spray of coffee across my bare feet. For a second, I just stared at the brown spreading stain and listened, my heart pounding in my throat. There it was again, a laugh I knew better than my own. Have you ever had your past reach out and touch you through something as thin as a wall? Because that's exactly what it felt like memory had found a crack in the plaster and slipped through. I stood there in my new apartment, still half surrounded by unpacked boxes, the rain tapping softly at the window behind me, and I suddenly couldn't breathe. It had been a long day, a long few months, if I'm honest. I'd left my old job at the big architecture firm because I was tired of being treated like a disposable cog in a machine that never slept. Tired of staring at blueprints at 3 in the morning while my eyes burned and my chest felt heavier and heavier. I'd left my relationship of 7 years because we were basically just well-organized roommates, with matching toothbrushes and separate secret lies we never admitted to. I told everyone I needed a fresh start, new city, new job, new apartment. And that night, with cardboard boxes still half opened and my drafting table pushed by the rain-streaked window, I was supposed to be mapping out a simple, quiet future for myself. No drama, no chaos, no more walking on the thin edge of disaster. So when that voice threaded through the wall of my supposedly peaceful little apartment, all those plans cracked like my coffee mug. For a moment, I told myself I was imagining it. That grief could echo like that, trick the ears the same way it tricks the heart. I mean, I went to his funeral. I saw the casket. I stood there shaking while people hugged me and told me it wasn't my fault that I survived the accident and he didn't. That Leo was in a better place now, as if that was supposed to be comforting to an 18-year-old who still had the smell of gasoline and burning rubber trapped in her hair. But then I heard it again, this time not the laugh, but the way he cleared his throat afterward. A tiny habit, a small sound I hadn't heard outside of nightmares. And I knew, whatever logic said, whatever reality demanded, every nerve in my body screamed the same thing. That's him. Or at least, it was the closest thing to him I'd heard in over a decade. I should have walked away, turned up the TV, blamed it on thin walls and a tired mind. Instead, I found myself moving closer, my bare feet slipping a little on the spilled coffee as I stepped over the broken ceramic and pressed my palm against the cool wall. The voice was muffled, but the tone was unmistakable. He was talking to someone, maybe on the phone, maybe a TV character. I couldn't tell. I couldn't make out the words, but I heard it. That half laugh, that pause before he answered, like he was measuring what to say. Just like Leo, my chest tightened. Stop it, I whispered to myself. Elena, stop. But I couldn't. That first night, I didn't knock on his door. I didn't march down the hallway and demand to see his face. I did something worse. I let my mind fill in the gaps. I dreamed of him. In my dream, we were back in the car, rain-smudged headlights and wet asphalt stretching ahead. I was in the driver's seat again, knuckles white on the steering wheel, and he was next to me with that bracelet on his wrist, the thin leather band I'd braided for him this summer before we graduated. Only this time, when the tires screeched and the metal screamed and the world spun, I looked over and his seat was empty. I woke up with my heart hammering, the echo of his laugh still in my ears. The rain hadn't stopped. It drew little rivers down the glass, turning the city lights into blurred constellations. I sat up, pushed my hair out of my face, and told myself, it's just a coincidence. People have similar voices. Brains make patterns out of anything they can. But when I opened my front door to pick up the package the super had left on the doormat, I heard a key turning in a lock next door. The sound was ordinary, every day, except my body reacted like a siren had gone off. My hand froze on the doorknob. The hallway smelled like dust and old paint, the overhead fluorescent flickering weakly, a faint hum filling the silence between us. He stepped out first. Dark jacket, jeans, a messenger bag slung across his chest. Wet hair, like he'd just showered. And when he turned his head slightly and saw me, a little half smile moved across his mouth in a way that nearly buckled my knees. It wasn't exactly Leo. He was older, of course, sharper around the jaw. His hair was shorter than Leo's had been, and there were faint lines around his eyes. But God, the resemblance, the way his brow creased, the almost familiar scar near his right eyebrow, small and pale, like the one Leo had gotten climbing the fence behind our high school. "Hey," he said. His voice in the open air was even worse than through the wall. I clutched the thin cardboard package like a lifeline. "Hi." My voice sounded wrong in my own ears, to high, shaky. "You must be new," he said, nodding at the boxes stacked inside my doorway. "I'm, Daniel. Daniel." The name hit me like a splash of cold water. Leo didn't have a middle name. He used to joke about it, say his parents hadn't wanted to give him too many options. My brain scrambled for sense. Faces can look similar. Voices can overlap. Scars can be coincidences. People are just people, right? "Elena," I heard myself say. "Nice to meet you." His eyes flickered just for a second. I should have known then. There was a split-second reaction. Something like recognition too fast to catch if you weren't staring at him the way I was. Like you were trying to see a ghost slightly out of focus. "Nice to meet you too," he said, but the words were a beat too slow. I retreated into my apartment as casually as I could, closed the door, and pressed my back against it. My heart was punching at my ribs. Maybe, I thought, I'm going insane. It would make sense, wouldn't it? After everything, grief, stress, uprooting my life, moving to a city where I know exactly no one. Maybe my brain just picked the loudest, clearest memory from the past and projected it onto the first semi-familiar person it could find. But the thing about lying to yourself is that your body usually doesn't play along. For the rest of that week, every time I heard his footsteps in the hallway, my pulse jumped. Every time he laughed, every time his phone rang, every muffled conversation through the wall. I leaned in, listening even as I told myself not to. Should I have knocked sooner? Maybe. Instead, fate or bad wiring forced us into closer contact. 3 nights later, a storm rolled in off the coast. Lightning flickered across the sky, and the building's power proved it was as old as the peeling paint suggested. Around 10, everything went dark. I almost welcomed it. No screens, no emails, no excuses to work. Just the drumming of rain on the window and the sound of the city softening. I lit a candle on the coffee table, set my sketchbook down, and tried to draw. My hands wouldn't cooperate. The lines on the page kept resolving into the same profile, his or Leo's. Did they count as separate people if they shared the same way of tilting their head when they listened? I sighed, got up, and decided to go downstairs to the cafe beneath the building to see if they still had power. The hallway outside my apartment was a tunnel of shadow, lit only by the weak blue glow of emergency exit signs. I took a step, then another, one hand skimming the rough wall. Halfway to the stairwell, I saw another, dimmer light ahead, someone else using their phone as a flashlight. As my eyes adjusted, the silhouette sharpened into a tall figure in a jacket. "Power's out," he said, without looking back. I recognized the voice immediately. "Yeah," I replied. I thought maybe the cafe would be open. He finally turned, and for a moment the soft glow from his phone lit his face from below, carving strange shadows along his cheekbones. There was a tiny scar above his right eyebrow, the bracelet. My eyes snagged on his wrist. There, peeking from under his jacket sleeve, was a thin, worn leather band, braided, dark brown. The knot at the end tied in a way I recognized because my fingers had tied it. My stomach dropped. Where did you get that? I didn't recognize my own voice. It sounded hoarse, dragged over gravel. He followed my gaze. For a second, his expression went completely blank. Then he cleared his throat. This. He touched it lightly, almost protectively. An old friend made it. Long time ago. Old friend. I swallowed. She must have cared about you. He didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched like a rope between us. Yeah, he said finally, soft. She did. I didn't take very good care of her. The hallway seemed to tilt. I grabbed the rail of the stairwell and forced myself to keep moving. One step, another. I didn't ask more questions. Not that night. But the storm outside was nothing compared to the one in my chest. When I got back to my apartment later, coffee in hand and mind buzzing, I pulled out my old box. The one I'd carried through 3 apartments and 2 cities, but never fully unpacked. Inside was a stack of letters, a ticket stub from a fair we'd gone to, a horrible folded drawing he'd done of us as stick figures. One arm in a sling to tease me for breaking my elbow that year, and a photograph. Leo, at 17, standing on the bridge just outside our hometown, wind in his hair. That ridiculous bracelet on his wrist. I held the photo up to the dim light and focused on the details, the scar near his eyebrow, the way his right shoulder slouched just a little lower than the left. The curve of his smile. Then I saw it. Not in the picture, but reflected faintly in the glass of my window. A car parked across the street, engine running, headlights off. I squinted. Maybe it was nothing, just someone on a late-night call. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was staring back at me. Sleep became a negotiation after that. On some nights, exhaustion won and pulled me under fast and deep. On others, I lay awake, listening for footsteps, for his laugh, for the car outside. I started watching him the way architects watch buildings, looking for cracks, asymmetries, signs of strain beneath the surface. He never had visitors. He came and went at odd hours, always with that same worn messenger bag. He didn't seem dangerous. Not in the obvious way. He'd hold the door for elderly tenants, carry their groceries up the stairs, make polite conversation with the barista downstairs. And yet, when anyone asked him casual things, so, where are you from? Or what do you do? His answers were vague, like he was drawing a sketch of a life instead of showing its blueprint. One evening, I found myself sitting across from him in the cafe, both of us on our laptops. The smell of espresso and warm bread thick in the air. Busy day? He asked, nodding at my open design model. They're all busy, I said lightly. We just pretend some are less so. He chuckled, and an old, half-forgotten warmth flared under my ribs. You sound like you've done this too long, he said. Architecture? Life? I replied before I could stop myself. His eyes lifted from his screen, studied me. Something in his gaze softened, like he understood more than my words. Yeah, he said. I know that feeling. I wanted to ask him then. I wanted to hold up the photograph and the bracelet and the voice and demand the truth. But what if I was wrong? What if this was just a man who unfortunately looked and sounded like the person I'd buried in my heart? And I was about to hurt both of us by ripping open an old wound for no reason. Or worse, what if I was right? The question haunted me until the night I saw him leave. It was late, maybe close to midnight. I'd been at my drafting table, trying to focus, the city outside muted by fog. I heard his apartment door open, then the quick, purposeful rhythm of his steps in the hallway. Curious, I peeked through the viewer as he passed my door. Messenger bag, jacket zipped, eyes scanning the hallway like he was expecting someone, or avoiding someone. A few seconds later, I was in my boots, coat half on, following him at a distance. I told myself I was being insane, that this was stalking, not closure. But my feet kept moving. He walked past the cafes and shops, past the busy streets, heading toward the quieter edge of the city where buildings thinned out and the river widened. The air smelled damp and metallic. It took me a moment to realize where he was going. The small park at the water's edge. The one with the old bench facing the river. He sat down heavily, elbows on his knees, staring out at the dark water. The scene overlapped with another from 14 years ago, him on that bridge, wind in his hair. My heart in my throat. I stepped out of the shadows before I could change my mind. Leo. The name left my mouth like it had been waiting at the back of my tongue for years. He froze. Slowly. He turned his head. Even in the dim light, I saw his face go pale. "What did you call me?" he asked, voice carefully neutral. My throat felt dry. "That's your name, isn't it?" I walked closer, my hands trembling. "Not Daniel. Leo." His jaw tightened. For a long moment, he didn't answer. The only sounds were the rush of the river and the distant hiss of traffic. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally, but his voice cracked on the last word. Something in me snapped. "You died," I said, the words tumbling out now. "They told me you died. There was a funeral, a casket. Your mother sobbed on my shoulder. I dream about that night every time the weather changes. So if you're not Leo, then you are the cruelest coincidence in the universe. And if you are, then what the hell are you doing sitting on a bench like nothing happened?" He looked at me like he was standing on a cliff edge. "I didn't know you survived like that," he said quietly. They told me you moved on, that you were better off without me, that if I tried to contact you, I'd be putting you in danger." "Danger from what?" I demanded. He looked away, jaw working. "My father owed people," he said finally. "Bad people. The accident. It was an opportunity. They used it. They told me if I wanted you safe, if I wanted out, I had to disappear. So I did. Disappear." The word hung between us like smoke. Anger flared up, sharp and hot. "So you let me bury you," I said, voice shaking. "You let me stand over an empty box and think I'd killed you." His eyes squeezed shut. "It wasn't supposed to be like that," he whispered. I thought time would fix it." I snapped. "Erase you. It doesn't work that way." He nodded once, like a man accepting a verdict he knew was coming. "I know that now," he said. A car engine rumbled somewhere up the street. We both glanced back in the same direction. A familiar unease crept up my spine. A dark sedan idled not far from the park entrance. Lights off. Watching. "Is that for you?" I asked. He followed my gaze and his expression hardened. "Probably," he said. "They've been circling for a while." My heart jumped into a panicked rhythm. "Who are they?" "Someone who thinks the past isn't paid in full yet," he said. "Another reason I shouldn't have moved in next to you. I didn't know it was you at first. I swear. Then I heard your voice through the wall and..." He trailed off, eyes shining. I didn't know what to do. I stayed away because I thought I was protecting you. But maybe all I did was drag you into this twice. A figure got out of the sedan. Tall, dark coat. The kind of presence that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "We need to go," I said. "Now." He shook his head. "If I run, it just gets worse." For both of us, he stood up slowly, shoulders squared, like a man walking back into a fire he once barely survived. "Stay behind me," he murmured. "Don't say anything unless you have to." The man approached, shoes crunching softly on the gravel path. Up close, he looked oddly ordinary. Tired eyes, lines etched deep around his mouth. "Daniel," he said, like it was a joke only he found funny. "You've been hard to find." I felt Leo because that's who he was. Whatever name he used go tense beside me. "We had a deal," he replied. "I've been paying what I can." "Not fast enough," the man said mildly. His gaze flicked to me, assessing. "And now you've got company." That's messy. Fear coiled in my stomach. But fear wasn't new. I'd lived with it for 14 years, wrapped in guilt and silence. This time, I was tired of being quiet. "Hurting him doesn't get you paid," I said, surprising myself. The man's eyebrows lifted. "Excuse me. If he disappears again, whatever he owes you disappears with him," I continued, forcing my voice to stay steady. "But he's got a job now. Skills. Stability. You could bleed him dry trying to scare him. Or you could let him do what he already started. Pay this off. Properly. Legally." The man studied me for a long, heavy moment. The river sounded louder. Leo didn't interrupt. He just looked at me like he was seeing someone he hadn't expected to exist anymore. Finally, the man sighed. "You're mouthy," he said. I remember when he used to be the one talking too much. He shrugged. "Fine. I'm not in the business of charity, sweetheart. But dead men don't pay debts. You've got." He looked at Leo. 6 months. Then we talk again." He turned and walked back to the car, leaving exhaust and tension in his wake. We stood there until the taillights disappeared. Only then did I realize my hands were shaking. Back at the building, we climbed the stairs in silence. The power was still out. The hallway washed in dim emergency light. Halfway up, Leo stopped and rested his hand against the wall, breathing like he'd just run a mile. I leaned against the opposite wall, suddenly exhausted. "You shouldn't have done that," he said. "I couldn't just stand there," I answered. "You tried that once already. It didn't work out great for either of us." He huffed a broken laugh. The sound hurt and healed at the same time. "You could walk away," he said. "Now, pretend you never saw me. I'll move. Start over again. You can have the life you came here for. Quiet. Simple. Safe. Safe." The word tasted like dust. "Do you really think it's that simple?" I asked softly. "You're alive, Leo. That fact alone means nothing about my life was ever what I thought it was. I've been living with a ghost for 14 years. Now you're here telling me the ghost bleeds, owes money, and makes bad decisions." His mouth twitched. "I did always excel at those." "Yeah," I said. "You did." We reached our floor. In the dimness, the doors to our apartments looked like two closed book covers with a story trapped between them. He turned to me then, fingers moving to the bracelet on his wrist. Slowly, he loosened the knot and slid it off. The leather was darker now, worn smooth by time. He held it out to me. "If you want me to disappear again," he said quietly, "I will. Properly this time. No more half-truths. You deserve better than." His hand shook just enough for me to see it. I stared at the bracelet, at the symbol of a boy we used to be, standing between the man he was now and the woman I'd become without him. Part of me wanted to slam my door and lock it and call this whole thing a bad hallucination. To choose safety, distance, forgetting. But hadn't I already tried that, too? Hadn't I spent 14 years avoiding bridges, flinching at the smell of rain on asphalt, refusing to let anyone get close enough to leave a scar? "I'm not going to pretend this is okay," I said finally. It's not. You hurt me. You let me grieve someone who wasn't dead. You let me carry that weight alone. His eyes shone in the thin light. I know, he whispered, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it, if you let me. I took a deep breath. No more lies, I said. No more disappearing acts. If we do this, we do it honestly. I'd rather be hurt by the truth than comforted by another funeral. Slowly, I reached out and took the bracelet. The leather was warm from his skin. Without breaking eye contact, I wrapped it around my wrist and tied the knot. His shoulders sagged, but it wasn't defeat, it was something like relief. Okay, he said, then no more ghosts. The power surged back on with a soft click, hallway lights humming to life. We both blinked against the sudden brightness. It felt almost symbolic, which would have annoyed me if it didn't also make something deep in my chest loosen. He stepped back toward his door. Good night, Elena, he said. Good night, Leo, I replied. Inside my apartment, the world felt the same and completely different at once. The rain had stopped. The city outside was wet and glistening, light pooling in the streets like melted gold. I stood by the window and watched a car drive past. Not the same dark sedan, just someone going home. Someone whose past probably wasn't chasing them up stairwells and into old parks. I pressed my fingers lightly to the bracelet. Maybe love couldn't erase what had happened. Maybe it couldn't make us teenagers again, or undo caskets and staged deaths and dangerous men in dark coats. But for the first time in 14 years, I wasn't running away from the question of whether I still loved him. I was turning toward it, even if the answer scared me. I don't know if love can outpace a past like his or a fear like mine. I don't know if 6 months from now that car won't come back, or if new ghosts won't climb out of the shadows and knock on our doors. All I know is this: the man who was supposed to be dead lies next door to me. And this time, if the past comes knocking, I won't be hiding in the dark alone.